Donald Trump took the witness stand to defend himself against a lawsuit claiming he should pay millions of dollars for defaming and sexually abusing E Jean Carroll. He told the court he stands by his claim that he never met her in testimony that lasted just 4 minutes. Also tonight, Mr. Trump's former trade advisor, Peter Navarro, is jailed for 4 months for ignoring a court subpoena investigating alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election result. A convicted murderer in Alabama is set to become the first person executed in the United States using nitrogen gas. It's a method that the UN has likened to torture. And the week in artificial intelligence will explain all you need to know in this week's AI Decoded. All those stories to come on The Context for you tonight, but we're going to start with news that former US President Donald Trump has spoken in court, albeit briefly, to defend himself in a defamation case. In the testimony that lasted just 4 minutes, Mr. Trump reiterated his stance that he'd never met his accuser. Well, these are courtroom sketches of Mr. Trump listening to testimony earlier in the day. Well, the case is a civil suit brought by writer E Jean Carroll, who's seeking more than $10 million in damages for defamation against him for comments that he made in 2019, after she accused him of raping her in the 1990s. Well, a judge has already ruled that Trump's statements were defamatory. The jury's job now is to decide how much Mr. Trump must pay in damages. Let's take you live to New York, and Neda Tawfik is there. And Neda, as I said, just 4 minutes of testimony. Did we learn anything from it?
Yeah, Ben, you know, as you say, such a short amount of time was spent on the actual testimony that if you look, far more time was spent on outlining exactly what Trump would be allowed to say, the judge really leaving absolutely no room for him to launch into a monologue or to campaign. And it was really, I think, more to establish the spectacle of him testifying in this case, to show to his base that he wasn't afraid to testify, that he was willing to fight. When he got on the stand, his lawyer simply asked him if he stood by the deposition that he had given earlier in a previous case related to this one. He said he 100% did. She then asked if he ever meant to instruct anyone to hurt E Jean Carroll. He said no. And then he went on to say that he did this only to protect his family, to protect himself, the presidency. But as I say, the judge not giving him leeway to launch into any type of monologue. So this ended fairly quickly. But if you look at just the amount of press coverage, the fact that his base is so invested and tuned in, I would argue that Donald Trump, coming here between his campaign events, will have seen this as worth his time.
Yes, and that's the point, isn't it, Neda? Because in this case, she is seeking $10 million in damages. But Mr. Trump will use this, as you've touched on there, to appeal to his base. He'll use this as a campaign stunt, won't he?
Absolutely. I mean, it's quite extraordinary that this is the second defamation case, that he's already been fined $5 million in the past. Now she's seeking $10 million or more. And you would expect someone in that position to try to show the jury that they aren't trying to cause any harm. But Donald Trump and publicly has certainly said that he's never met her. But even today in court, uttering from the defense table while he wasn't under oath that he had never met her, that this was unfair, loud enough so that the jury could hear. And the jury could ultimately take that as he is repeatedly defaming E Jean Carroll and harming her, and they could decide to fine him even more than that $10 million ask by E Jean Carroll. So it was certainly risky, but again, it is because this is playing so well into his campaign. He is fundraising so much out of his legal troubles and still doing well in the polls. So his legal considerations in these cases are really taking a back seat to the priorities of his campaign as he seeks to solidify the Republican nomination.
Yes, and you touched on it there, Neda. I mean, this is just one case that is ahead for Mr. Trump. I'm looking here, we're just getting details of what he was reported to have said whilst leaving the courtroom. It's not America, not America. This is not America, he said. Now, there were no cameras allowed in the courtroom, were there? We saw those sketches a little earlier, and one assumes Mr. Trump may have been disappointed by that because as we've touched on, he likes to use these occasions to appeal to his base, and particularly those comments, "It is not America." This is all part of his strategy to recast how he would run America if he took the White House again.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see how he is really testing the court's limits. This court doesn't have the types of kind of cameras in the hallways that his past civil fraud trial had. There, every time he would go into the courtroom, he would have an audience of cameras. He would be able to speak. Again, it was pretty much a memorized speech at the end of the trial, saying it was a witch hunt, that the judge, the prosecutors were all Democratic operatives, that he was being treated unfairly. This was all to undermine his entire base, not just him, and to stop him from going into the White House. And we heard that speech over and over, broadcast live across U.S. media, reported on, because ultimately he is a former president facing significant legal troubles. And so he is using that to his advantage, while instead, seeing this as kind of a situation where it could hurt his campaign. He has used it to help. It's worked so far. And so because it has been a winning strategy, he continues to do that. So as I say, testing the limit of each court. This is a federal court. No cameras were allowed inside. That will be the case in a few of the other trials where he's facing 91 felony counts. But certainly, whenever he can and whenever he has an audience, he uses it to his advantage.
Neda, good to have you there with the details on that. Thanks very much.